So what we're talking about today, I wrote the title for it, is just life as a journey. And so what we're going to talk about today, if you take away anything from what I'm going to share, I would hope that I could help you just view life with kind of a different lens. Especially in our culture here, we are handed one lens of how to view life. We often call it the American dream. We're viewed this kind of linear progression. You do this, you get the degree, you get the job, you get retirement. That's a lot of what we're handed. But what I'm going to talk about today is viewing life through a little different perspective necessarily than what you're handed. And I'm going to start off by reading a quote. You guys mind if it gets really deep really quickly? All right, I got one approval. So, one little quote I'm going to read. It says, "Our great whirling planet, our human individuality, were not given to us merely that we might exist for a time and then vanish into nothingness, but that we might question what it is all about. To live without understanding the purpose of life is foolish and a waste of time. The mystery of life surrounds us, and we were given the intelligence in order to solve it." So is everyone's mind blown? So that's what we're going to talk about today, because so often in college we go through these phases where we talk about, like, what do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? What do you want to do for a living? And we kind of stay on the surface, but no one ever goes one level deeper and asks, why? Like, why does that matter? Why do you like playing jazz guitar? Because I bet it's not because you're like, well, I really like pushing these strings down, and when I push these strings down, it makes a noise. Sometimes it sounds good, sometimes it sounds discongruent, but that's why I play jazz guitar. Is that how you would describe it?
No, probably a little bit different.
It's art. It hits something in your soul. It feels different. Like you get something out of it. It communicates something without words. So that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today in regards of life. So if you guys are taking notes, which you should definitely take notes. We're going to talk about 3 things today. So everyone pull out your iPhones, or I don't know, maybe it's Android, other phones. Or if you have a notepad and you go old school like Hermie. So these are the 3 things we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about purpose. We're going to talk about navigating failure. That's the second thing we're going to talk about. And the third thing we're going to talk about today is how to move forward. Here, I'll move this way so you can see it. How to move forward. All right. So first of all, with purpose, there's this book that was written called Start With Why, which I think is a really fun title. It's basically the idea, when you hear people like, what's your why? That's a phrase that sometimes we throw on in the Southwestern Advantage program. I never really encountered that before, and people say, what's your purpose? Why do you do what you do? I never really thought about that before, and I needed a little bit more guidance in how to understand that. And so that's what we're going to talk about now, is how to actually find your purpose. And so the reason that your why, I'm going to keep referring to it as your why throughout this talk, but the reason your why is so important is because, again, in our culture, we often focus on what you want to do. We often focus on the destination. So I'll put it in a context that makes sense, like college. I don't know if this happened to any of you all, but at Baylor, we're really known for our pre-med program, because we have a really good med school connected to our university. And I would say like over 50% of students that are freshmen at Baylor University are pre-med. So how many of you guys, again, hypothetically, you or someone, you get to college, you're like, I want to be a doctor. And you have this vision, like, I want to be a doctor, and you're pre-med, and you get into your first chemistry class, and you just get like nailed. And you're like, chemistry sucks. Sorry, Mohammed, I know you like chemistry. But you're like, maybe you get into you're like, I hate chemistry. This is not fun. I don't like this. If your whole value and your whole identity was placed in the "but I'm going to be a doctor" box, what happens when you're on that path to become a doctor, because you have to start somewhere, so you're starting by being pre-med, and you realize that you don't like any of your science courses? What happens to this end destination? Can that stand up anymore, or does that kind of start crumbling? Absolutely. Have you guys ever experienced that in any other area of your life? Yeah. Totally, because that's what we do. We put life as a journey. We put on all these different identities, and we well, this is who I am. This is what I'm associated with, and we start to define ourselves by what we do. But then eventually, when we stop liking what we do, when we stop liking that thing, we keep trying to defend that that's who our identity is. But in all reality, it's time to like set that down and pick up something different. And that's what happens so much in college. Maybe your parents had a plan for you. They're like, this is what I want you to study. You know, dad was a lawyer. Your uncle was a lawyer. Grandpa was a lawyer. So you better be a lawyer. And so you're like, all right, I'm going to be a lawyer. And all of a sudden you get to college, you're like, I don't really want to be a lawyer. Or maybe some of you guys were like, my parents weren't really even involved enough to care about what I did, and I kind of wish they threw an identity on me, because that would have been more helpful than what I got. But everyone's kind of in a different boat when it comes to your identity. But that's why starting with your why and your purpose, it kind of prevents that roller coaster, because when you're the pre-med student and you realize you don't like science anymore, all of a sudden you're thrown back into this whirlpool of, well, then what's my life about? What do I really believe in? But if you get really clear on what you're passionate about, and it was Adriana, right? And you share that you like helping people. And I bet if you spend a little bit more time with that, digging a little bit deeper and think, what is it that I really like about helping people? How do I really like to do that? And when you get clear on what that is, all of a sudden, what you actually do doesn't necessarily matter as much, as long as that's your purpose, that's guiding everything. Because are there an infinite number of ways that you can help people? Exactly. So can you ever be thrown off of that path? Not really. And so that's why the whole idea of purpose and starting with why, when you get really clear on what that is, like why do you do what you do? That's a really simple question to ask, and I'm sure that in the lead binder it goes through that a little bit. And that's one of the biggest things I learned in Southwestern when I was selling books every summer in college and for a couple summers after college. It wasn't enough to just have a goal of like, this is how much money I want to make. Because what happens when you don't get that result? If that was your whole purpose of doing something, if you don't immediately get the results you want, what happens to your motivation? Gone. But if your purpose is like, I want to learn and grow because I want to develop these skills, I want to become a better person, I want to become more disciplined, I want to have more patience with people, can you learn that regardless if you're the number 1 producer or like the number 2,000 producer? Does that make sense? And so I want to read one quote to you. This quote has actually been, I like quotes, by the way, so I have 3 of them. We're on number 2. This is the second quote I'm going to read tonight. This quote has actually been one of those guiding principles for me and for my life. And Peter mentioned briefly I was doing sales coaching and consulting. So my job was to help other people be better at their jobs, which is really interesting. And so I was coaching like real estate agents. I was coaching loan officers. I, oddly enough, coached the drummer of Kenny Chesney. Have you guys ever heard of Kenny Chesney? Big country music artist. I coached his drummer on how to build out his own recording studio business, which was really fascinating. But eventually I got to a point where it wasn't making me, I'm going to use this phrase a lot tonight, it wasn't making me really come alive. And so this quote is from a guy named Howard Thurman, who's really involved in the civil rights movement in the 60s. And he said, don't ask yourself what the world needs, but ask yourself what makes you come alive. And go do that, because what the world needs is people who have come alive. So I want you guys to think back a little bit. We just did an icebreaker talking about what are you passionate about. And so what you do is think back a little bit to that question and think about what really makes you come alive. And another way to put that is, when was the last time that when you were doing something you completely lost track of time? When you didn't realize how much time was passing?
Sleeping.
Every night. Somehow it happens. So sleep, but really think about that. Like an activity that you were participating in, all of a sudden you look up and like, wow, maybe, I'm sure it probably happens when you play music. I'm a musician. My wife and I play music as well. And it's, for me, there's so many, like for me, surfing is one of those things where I don't even know how much time passes, because it's just, I'm out there, I'm really present with what I'm doing. Because I think, do you guys ever find that it's harder and harder to be focused because there's so many things that are distracting? Like, I got to check my Instagram account. This email happened. This event's happening tonight. This concert's going on. I have this test tomorrow. And it's all coming at you. But when you're doing that one activity that you can think of and you don't realize time passes, that's probably something you should take note of and realize that might be something that makes you come alive. And when you're going through that question of like, what's really my purpose, that might be a good place to start. So in 10 minutes, I'm not going to help you solve the question of what is my life's purpose, but hopefully you've gotten some tools and you've gotten a different perspective in how to discover what that purpose is. Does that make sense? Is that helpful?
Yes.
A little bit? Okay. And so what we're going to talk about, again, your why helps you even figure out what path you want to be on life. When you find out what your why is, write that down. why. Another phrase, write down, come alive. It's really funny on this little bracelet. It's called a road ID. I used to race triathlon, and I rode motorcycles. It's kind of like dog tags for endurance athletes. So if I get hit by a bus on the side of the road on my bicycle, they can know who I am. But it's really funny, on the bottom of it, it says come alive, and which a lot of people think it's funny because they think it has to do with like resuscitating me. But it's actually referencing this quote of, for me, it's a reminder of always do something that makes me come alive. So we've gotten a little closer of discovering your life purpose, hopefully. Now what we're going to talk about is what happens when you get clear on your purpose, you understand why you're passionate about what you're passionate about. And you're not just looking at what do you do, what's your major, but you're looking one step deeper and saying, why does that actually matter? Why is that important to me? And you get really clear on that. And then you start down that path, and then what happens? You inevitably fail a lot. So we're going to talk about navigating failure. So I want you guys to write down 3 things, these 3 words. Control, influence, and accept. So write down the 3 words: control, influence, and accept. Everyone got it? So this lesson applies to anything that you could possibly do in life. I would go as far to say that everything you do in life falls into one of those 3 categories. So I want you to think really quickly, what in your life do you actually have control over?
What? Your thoughts.
Your thoughts? Mm-hmm.
Your actions.
Your actions. What else? So you got your thoughts, your actions. Attitude.
What you say.
Uh-huh. Thoughts, actions, your attitude, what you say. What else do you actually have control over in your life?
Decisions.
Mm-hmm. Your decisions.
How you feel, like how you perceive stuff. I mean, it kind of comes from your thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Your emotions, in a sense, can be controlled.
Absolutely. Kind of like how you respond and how you react to things. Uh-huh. Do you guys notice a theme? What does every single one of these have to do with?
With you.
With you. Outside of yourself, do you have any control over anything that happens while you're alive?
How much water you put in the cup?
Huh? See how much water you put in a cup is up to you. So, I promise you, this will make your life way more peaceful if you remember this. The only thing that you have control over in your entire life is you. And I'm going to put that into 2 categories. And I actually learned I was taught this by Southwestern. Anything that I feel like people that are teaching it feels really influential, it's probably because they learned it from someone that was really influential and they're just regurgitating it. So I didn't come up with this on my own. I learned this in Southwestern. And when I was selling books door to door, lots of things happen that you can't control, and you have to learn how to keep moving forward and have a positive attitude. So under control, I want you to put 2 words. You control your effort and your attitude. You control your effort and your attitude. The only 2 things you actually have control over. Your effort, meaning you control what you do and how much effort and how much work you put into whatever it is that you do. And then, like you're saying, you control your attitude about it. You control how you respond to what happens in life. So next category, influence. What do you have influence over? What can you influence in life? People. Yeah, you can influence people. You can influence people, good or bad. You can influence through influencing people. You can probably influence situations. But then there's things in life that you simply have to accept. Sometimes things happen to you that you have to accept. On August 23rd last year, I wrecked a motorcycle out on the Highway 94. I rode sport bikes, and I've separated my shoulder, got a nice little bit of road rash on my foot, but I didn't get hit by a car, and it was really wonderful. And so I had to accept what happened to me. Because how many people do you know go through some sort of trial, some sort of setback, some sort of failure, and they adopt that attitude of like, why me? You don't have to raise your hand, but how many of you guys have ever done that? I've totally done that. Like, why does this happen to me? It's so easy for that guy. And that attitude will never get you anywhere because it doesn't help you move forward. Because again, you don't have control over that. All you have control over is your effort and your attitude. So this is how you navigate setbacks, how you navigate failure. When you get really clear on why you do what you do and the purpose behind what you do, again, this helps you understand life as a journey. So I want you guys to think really quickly. I want you to think, you don't have to answer this out loud, but just think in your own head. think about the most recent mistake or failure that you encountered or that you went through. Or thing you're like, oh, I regret that. Maybe it was this weekend. It's a joke. But so I want you to think back, your biggest, the thing that pops in your head. I'm sure every one of you guys has something that pops in your head. I totally do. It's like, oh, yeah, we got that. I want you to think about that lesson, and I want you we're doing a little mental exercise, again, changing your perspective on how you view yourself in your life. Take that exercise. I want you to think of one thing that you learned from that experience, one positive thing that you learned from that experience, and one positive thing that taught you. Just think about that. Again, you don't have to say anything out loud. You can write it down if you want. But just think one positive experience that taught you. Everyone got something? So this is a little mental exercise that, for me, again, viewing life as a journey rather than the whole point being the destination, because if you view life, the only point is the destination. If you ever fail or have a setback, then you blew the whole thing. But if there isn't really a path, you can't really get off of it. Does that make sense? When life is a journey, every little setback is actually a lesson along the way. And so that's where that's what leads us into how do you move forward? So first, you have to start with why. You have to get really clear on why do I want to do what I want to do. Loved your rap, by the way. What was your name again? I didn't meet you. Conrad? Yep. Good to meet you. So I'm sure that there's a deeper purpose of why you enjoy rapping. And you think through, okay, rapping's fun. Why do I really enjoy this? And then I bet if you pursue that trade and that art more, you're going to encounter failure and setback. And then you get to the point of, all right, how do we move forward? So one of the biggest ways to move forward, if you guys want to write this down, this is, and if for some of you, I know a handful of you guys are actually doing the summer internship this summer. This is one of the biggest things I would say helped me succeed and do really well my first summer ever in the Southwestern program, was viewing every single day as a teacher. And what I mean by that is enlightened people don't view an experience as, is this good or bad? They view it as, what does this have to teach me? And that was actually one of the biggest reasons I did really well my first summer ever in the Southwestern Advantage summer internship that Peter mentioned, was because I viewed every day as, what does this have to teach me? What lesson can I learn from this? And so that's step one. And I took notes because sometimes, I know Mohammed mentioned that we both get off track when we talk in front of people. So I took notes to keep myself on track. So the first thing is, again, what do you have to learn from every single experience? The second thing that how to move forward, again, when you get really clear on your why, you get really clear on what your purpose is. Why do you actually do what you do? Why does that matter to you? How does that make you come alive? And we talked about navigating failure and setback. And the third way of how to move forward is, I want you guys to write down the bounce back factor. The bounce back factor. Has anyone in this room ever played golf or watched golf? Okay, basically everyone. All right. So golf is really more a game of recovery. I'll explain it this way. Let's say if we watch, Tiger Woods used to be a great example, but all of these famous athletes in the last 5 years, Tiger Woods, Lance Armstrong, we kind of lost all these role models. But we'll use Tiger Woods. So let's say he hits a terrible shot and he's stuck behind a tree. Can he do anything to change that situation?
He can move around the tree.
He move around the tree? But if his ball's sitting right there behind the tree, can he do actually anything to change that situation? No. Again, sometimes things happen, you just have to accept. Can he influence that situation, or is the ball going to be where the ball is? No. So you have to focus, what do I actually have control over? There's a really funny phrase of, wherever you go, there you are. As in, so many times we try to run away from ourselves to find ourselves. And so the bounce back factor with golf, the idea there is golf is a game of recovery. It's no matter what situation you find yourself in, hit the next best shot you possibly can with what you're given. Because how many times in life you go through, let's say you know what your major is and you just got in your first semester in that school. Maybe you're in the business school. Maybe you are doing pre-med. And first midterm rolls around and you bomb it. Does that happen to anybody?
Yes.
Yeah. What do you do then? Can you do anything to change your grade? Yeah, no. I mean, every once in a while they're like, hey, extra credit, which is awesome, but don't count on that. No, you can't do anything about it. So what do you do next? How do you take that situation, move that forward? So let's say you bomb a midterm. What can you do positively to move that situation forward? Yeah.
Learn how to study different, use a different strategy.
Absolutely. Go office hours, use a different strategy. What else could you do positively? to help you move forward?
The more effort.
Mm-hmm.
Motivation.
Yeah, work harder. Get a little bit more motivated. Get upset enough to do something different. So again, that's the idea of that's what all I mean by bounce back factor is how quickly do you bounce back? How quickly do you get back up again? And so for me in my own personal story, kind of in conclusion, this is, I know that we throw this phrase around a lot, like it changed my life, but really like this, what I talked about tonight, it really has changed my life. Because that quote I talked about, like really asking myself what makes me come alive, I have buddies that like corporate finance makes them come alive. They like love it. They're like, give me a spreadsheet. I love it. I'm not that person. That doesn't. But for everyone's really different. And when you get really honest with yourself, college is a beautiful place to discover a lot more about yourself and your identity and what you really believe in. And so for me, that question of what really makes me come alive, that dictated a lot of things. And so my wife and I just left my sales consulting job in San Diego. My wife and I don't know if any of you guys know what tiny houses are. Or maybe you've heard of them. Yeah, it's out. My wife and I we're literally getting rid of like the majority of everything we own. We're building our own tiny house. It's going to be like a little 250, 300 square foot house on a trailer. And we're going to buy a piece of land outside of Portland, Oregon, and start this holistic healing center to help people reconnect with themselves, reconnect with community, and reconnect with creation, because that got us excited. And for me, I worked with an awesome company coaching salespeople, but it wasn't one of those things I woke up every day and it's like, man, I love this. And so we're like, wait a minute, if we're only alive once, to my knowledge, thus far, then let's do what really makes us come alive. And so one of the things that I want to share with you guys, I thought back, what did I really want to hear when I was in college? And have any of you guys ever felt really overwhelmed with all the decisions you have to make when you're in college? Yeah. It's like, what am I supposed to study? What if I study the wrong thing? Am I going to get a job? Are there going to be jobs? Is the economy going to crash again? And it's all these decisions. And how many of you guys have ever been just felt overwhelmed with the fear of making the wrong decision? Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that I found that was really encouraging, according to my belief, you might have a different belief, but I think according to science, the Earth is the universe is like 13.7 billion years old. What I'm saying is, you're too small to mess it up. I find that encouraging. This whole thing about creation has been going on a lot longer than you have, and it's been moving forward a lot longer than you have. So I don't think you can really screw it up. And because I found so many people, and this is what I'm going to close with, is that we spend so much time worrying about making the wrong decision that we end up doing nothing. And so when you view life as a journey, I'm totally the phase kid. I was going to say was. I still am the phase kid. And you guys like that? Where like you do one thing and you get really into it for like a few years, and then you get really bored with it, and then you do something else, and you get really into it, and then you get really bored with it, and you do something else. That's been my whole life. And again, life is a journey. I don't have to get locked into one thing my entire life. Maybe you do want to get locked into one thing your entire life. But if there's one thing you can take away from this, it's actually take a little time and figure out, why do you do what you do? Like, why does that get you excited? Why does that make you come alive? And then remember what you actually have control over. And all it is yourself. And lastly, there's not a whole lot you can do to screw it up. I promise. And so that's all I want to share with you guys. And I'm gonna wrap up with you guys here. I said I had 3 quotes. I've only shared 2. So I'm going to read one more. Change yourself, and you've done your part in changing the world. Every individual must change his own life if he wants to live in a peaceful world. The world cannot become peaceful until you yourself begin to work towards peace. It is only by removing hate from our hearts that we can live a Christ-like life. That was by a guy named Paramahansa Yogananda. I practiced that name a lot, so I didn't screw that one up. So that's the last thing I'll leave you guys with, and this gets me excited because this was my favorite time of life, of like discovering more about my identity and what I believed in and what I was passionate about. Hopefully you learned something today that gets you like one step closer to figuring out what that is. So thanks, guys.